Good morning, guys. In yesterday's session, we discussed about how to roll back the transaction. Yesterday's class, we discussed about how to roll back the transaction. Good. In today's session, we are going to talk about connection pooling in data JPA. We are going to talk about what is connection pooling in the data JPA and how to customize that connection pooling in the data JPA. All right. Now, so first of all, how a Java application will communicate with the database table? Any idea? How a Java application will communicate with the database table, guys?
JDBC.
Using JDBC. If Java applications will communicate with the database by using JDBC as a mediator. Java applications will communicate with the database using JDBC API. Okay, sir, we are using Hibernate. We are using Spring ORM. We are using Spring Data. Can these APIs or can these technologies directly communicate with the database? No. Hibernate, if you are using, that Hibernate also cannot communicate with the database directly. Hibernate also cannot communicate with the database directly. If you are using Spring ORM, that also cannot communicate with the database directly. Okay, so if we use Hibernate to develop the persistence layer, if we use Hibernate to develop persistence layer, if we use Hibernate to develop the persistence layer, internally
Hibernate will use JDBC.
Hibernate will use JDBC API. If we use Spring ORM also, internally JDBC API will be used. So it is the standard that Java applications will communicate with the database by using JDBC. If I have a Java application and if I have a database here, if I have a Java application and if I want to communicate with the database, the JDBC API is the mandatory. Now, so what this JDBC API will do is JDBC API provided some methods for us to establish communication with the database. In JDBC API, we have several methods. We have several methods to perform DB operations. So in order to perform any operation in the database using Java program, first we need to establish connection with the database. JDBC API provided method. JDBC API provided method to establish connection with the database. JDBC API provided method to establish connection with the database. What is that method? That is driver manager dot get connection. URL, username, and password. These three values we are going to supply. Then it is going to return connection object for us. Then it is going to return connection object for us. Okay, so JDBC API contains methods to establish connection with the database. So what is the method that is there in the JDBC to establish the connection? Driver manager dot get connection method we have. Driver manager dot get connection method we have. URL, username, password. So database URL, username, password will supply as a parameters to this method. Then it is going to return connection object for us. Once we got the connection, then we can perform our operations with the database. Once connection got established with DB, then we can perform our persistent operations. Then we can perform our persistent operations like insert, delete, retrieve, update. In order to perform any of these operations, then we need a connection. So how to establish connection? By using driver manager dot get connection method, we are going to establish the connection with the database. Once this connection got established with the DB, then we can perform our persistent operations like inserting, deleting, retrieving, and updating. Now, so here the thing is, whenever you take any database, when you take any database like a Oracle or MySQL or some other, any database, if you install the database server, in the database, some connections will be available. Suppose assume that there are 100 connections available in the database. So every database will have a set of connections, a fixed number of connections will be available in the database. Now assume that here I am taking Oracle database. In the Oracle database, I am having 100 connections. In the Oracle database, I am having 100 connections. Now here my Java program is available. Here one Java program, here one Java program, here one Java program, here one Java program. Like this, there are multiple Java programs are available here. There are multiple Java programs are available here. So Java 1, then Java 2, Java 3, then Java 4. Like this, we have multiple Java programs. All these programs wants to communicate with the database. All these programs wants to communicate with the database. Now what will happen is, this Java application will communicate with the database by establishing a connection. So what the database will do is, when the Java program requested for a connection, the database will give one connection available in the database. Total 100 connections are available. First program has taken one connection. Now that first program is still open, that opened with the still using that connection, it is performing operations. Okay. Now at the same time, second Java program also requested for a connection, database provided. Similarly, third program requested and fourth program requested for connections. Like this, there are several Java programs are there, several operations are happening in the database, and all those programs has taken connections from the database. All those programs has taken the connections from the database. Okay. Now, like this, 100 Java programs are executing. 100 programs open the connections. So now database is having 0 connections because 100 programs are running. 100 programs acquired the connections from the database. 100 programs acquired the connections from the database. Okay. Now these programs has taken the connection, but they are not returning the connection. They have taken the connection, but they are not returning the connection. So the connections what they are taking is a physical connection. The connection that they are taking is a physical connection. They are taking the connection, but they have forgot to close the connection. Whenever you open a connection by using driver manager get connection, database will provide you physical connection. When you have taken the physical connection, you have to use that connection and you need to close it once your work is completed. You have to use that connection and you have to close it once your work is completed. You have to use it and you have to close it once your work is completed. All right. Whenever you go for driver manager.get connection, database will give physical connection to the program. Whenever you take a physical connection, it's mandatory that you have to close that connection. Otherwise, other programs cannot use that connection. Database will not have the connections to give for the other programs. So that one point we have to remember. When we get connection by using driver manager, the database will give physical connection. When we get connection, when we get connection using driver manager, then we have to close that connection. When we get connection using driver manager, then we have to close that connection. We have to close that connection. If we forgot to close the connection, if we forgot to close the connection, if we forgot to close the connection, after some amount of time, after some time, database will not have free connections. Database will not have free connections, and it will run into connections exhausted problem. It will run into connections exhausted problem. Okay. So programmers are requesting for the connections through Java program using driver manager.get connection. Then database is giving the connections to the programs. They all are physical connections. Whenever we get that physical connection, it's mandatory that we have to close that connection. We have to close that connection. Okay. If we don't close that connection, then what will happen? If we don't close that connection, then what is going to happen? So whenever a new program requested for the connection, database cannot give the connection for that program, then that is called connection exhausted problem. That is called connection exhausted problem. Now, to avoid these problems, to avoid these problems, we will use connection pooling. To avoid these problems, we will use connection pooling. Okay, now what we will do with the connection pooling? Okay, here first manually there get the connections, get connection. Program is going to get the connection directly from the database. That will become a physical connection. Get connection. Here also get connection. Here also get connection. Here also get connection. Okay. Now all these programs are going to get the connections from the database. All these programs are going to get the connections with the database. It is the normal approach. Now, when it comes to this, here we are going to set up a connection pooling. Okay. Now, here also database will have some limited number of connections. Every database will have some limited number of connections. Database. Okay. This database containing 100 connections. This database containing 100 connections. Now, here our Java programs are available. Here our Java programs are available. Java program 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that. Our Java programs are available. So earlier what happened is our Java programs directly getting the connection with the from the database, that is a physical connection. Okay, that is going to be a physical connection. Whenever you open a physical connection, it's mandatory that you have to close that connection. It's mandatory that you have to close that connection. It's mandatory that you have to close that connection. So to avoid this problem, what we will do is, in our project, we are going to set up connection pooling. We are going to set up connection pooling. Connection pooling. Connection pooling. So what we will do is, whenever our project is started, we will get some connections from the database and will store into this connection pool. Whenever our project is started, we are going to get some connections from the database and we are going to store into the connection pool. Okay, these are the connection, like 20 connections or 30 connections we'll get and we'll store them in the connection pool. Now, when my Java application requires a connection, do I need to interact with the database to get that, or I can take that from the connection pool? We can take that from the connection pool directly. No need to take the connection from the database every time, because already we has taken connections from the database and we stored them in the connection pool. We stored them in the connection pool. Whenever a program requires a connection, you no need to take it from the database directly. You take it from the connection pooling. Sir, what is the difference? What is the difference? If your program taking the connection from the database directly, then that connection is called as physical connection. If your Java program is taking connection from the database directly, then it is called as physical connection. If your program is taking the connection from the connection pool, then it is called as logical connection. Then it is called as logical connection. Able to understand this? What is a physical connection and what is a logical connection? If your program is taking the connections from the database directly, then those connections are called as physical connections. When you open a physical connection, it's mandatory that you have to close the connection. Otherwise, after some time, database will run into connections exhausted problem. Okay, now, so see, to avoid that problem in the project, what we will do is we don't open connection with the database directly. We don't open connection with the database directly. From the database, we will take some connections and we'll store in the connection pooling. Now, when our Java program requires a connection, instead of taking the connection from the database, we will take the connection from the connection pool. We'll take the connection from the connection pool. Now, whatever the connections you are taking from the connection pool, those connections are called as logical connections. Those connections are called as logical connections. Physical connection and logical connection. If your program is taking directly from the database, then it is called as physical connection. Instead of taking from the database directly, we are taking from the connection pool. Now, what is the advantage? Getting physical connection is a costly operation. Every time it has to load the driver, it has to make a network call, it has to interact with the database, it has to get the connection. That is performance issue. Application performance will be slow if you go for physical connection every time. And if you go for physical connection, there is a chance of getting connection exhausted problem after some time. So that's why we will go for connection pool and we can avoid that problem. Now, so whenever you create a connection pool, in the connection pool manager will be available. The connection pool manager will be available. That person is responsible to provide the connections for the programs. And here, that pool manager will give you a connection to the program and he will wait for some time. If the connection is not using by the program, pool manager will close the connection automatically. But in the physical connections, when the programmer open a connection, it's mandatory that that programmer only should close it. If the programmer forgot to close the connection, that connection will be open with the program. No other program can use that connection. So to avoid that problem, here pool manager comes into picture. So pool manager will give you a connection. Pool manager will give you a connection to the program which is requesting. After some time, the pool manager will close the connection if the program is not closing, so that we can avoid that connections exhausted problem here. We can avoid that connections exhausted problems here. Are you able to follow this? Are you able to follow this, guys? What is this connection pool?
Yes, sir.
What is the difference between physical connection and logical connection?
Yes,
The
sir.
connection which is taken from the pool, it's called as logical connection.
Yes.
The connection which is taken from the direct database, which is called as physical connection.
Physical connection. So which is recommended to use in the project?
Connection
Logical
pool.
conditions.
Logical
Everybody
conditions
connection
are recommended because performance will be speed, and if the program is not closing the connection, then pool manager is going to close that connection. Okay. Now, so earlier people used to develop the persistent logic by using JDBC, but in the JDBC we don't have any connection pooling support directly. We need to create that normally. After that, a Hibernate came. Hibernate provided the support for connection pooling. Similarly, data GPA also came up with a connection pooling mechanism. So whenever you develop the persistent layer by using data JPA, this also supporting for connection pooling. This is also supporting for connection pooling. Now let me run my program. I have not done anything. I don't have any changes to the program. As it is, I will run my program, which we have created yesterday. I'm going to run that program as it is. Service class method we are calling from here. Service class method we are calling. Okay, which is going to insert the record into database table. Which is going to insert the record into database table. Let us see how the record is inserting into the database table. What are the messages generating in the console? What are the messages generating in the console? Good. Execute. I'm running that program, guys. Yeah. See the console. What is this? Hikari pool. Hikari pool 1 starting. Hikari 1 pool start completed. That means register driver with the driver class name. Delete class it is using. After inserting the record, JP Entity Manager Factory got closed. Then Hikari pool shutdown initiated. Hikari pool shutdown completed. So connection pooling is available. Connection pooling is available in the data JPA, or connection pooling is not available in the data JPA.
Available in data JPA. Yes.
Available.
Connection pooling is using in the data JPA, or connection pooling is not using in the data JPA.
Available.
Connection pooling.
Connection pool is already available in the data JPA. Which connection pool is available in the data JPA?
Hikari pool.
Hikari pool. Hikari pool is available in data JPA. Hikari pool is available in the data JPA. Spring data JPA already having inbuilt connection pool, that is data JPA. Okay. Spring data JPA already having inbuilt connection pooling. Having inbuilt connection pooling, that is Hikari connection pool. Spring data JPA already having inbuilt connection pooling, that is Hikari connection pool. Spring data JPA already having inbuilt connection pooling, that is Hikari connection pool. Got my point? Get my point? Now, so if you want to customize that Hikari connection pool, that you can do by using application.properties. Some default configuration properties will be available for the connection pool. If you want to customize that, connection pooling properties, you can configure that in the application.properties file. Okay, here we configured data source properties, we configured ORM properties. So similarly, we can configure connection pool properties also. That is Hikari. Spring dot data source dot Hikari read only auto commit ideal timeout max time lifetime minimum ideal login timeout metric registry register ambience driver class name maximum pool size. So what is the maximum pool size you want to keep? Maximum, how many connections you want to keep in the pool? I want to keep 20 connections in the connection pool. I want to keep 20 connections in the connection pool. Spring dot data source dot Hikari dot ideal timeout connection timeout. So after opening a connection, after how much time that connection should be timed out? Okay, now I'm giving 1000 milliseconds. So if a programmer open a connection within 1000 milliseconds, that should be completed. Otherwise, it will throw timeout exception. Hikari connection timeout. Spring dot data source dot Hikari dot ideal timeout. Hikari dot ideal timeout. If nobody is using the connection for after opening a connection, if they are not using the connection for 500 milliseconds, then that connection should be closed because they are not using it. Then why to keep that connection open with them? Pool manager is going to close that connection. Okay, like this there are several connection pooling properties are available. We can configure those properties. There are Hikari connection pool properties. Spring dot data source dot Hikari dot maximum pool size. Okay, so Hikari maximum pool size, Hikari connection timeout, Hikari ideal timeout. Like that, there are several connection pool properties are available, which we can configure in our application.properties file. This is called customizing the connection pool. Now I'm running this project again. Yep, we're able to perform the operations. Hikari data source, the connection pool started and the connection pool got completed. Okay, good. So anybody having any questions on physical connections and logical connections?
So I have a doubt for when exactly we use for customized connections.
Sir, if your application is having lot of traffic, then you will set the pool size as 50, something like that. You want to increase the time. If you don't want to go with the default, so our application is going for the production, then lot of users will use our application. Then we need to increase those connections, right? Then you will go for customized.
Okay.
But in real time, all the applications are running only, right? It will not
Yes.
stop. So then that particular connection will be established for every time.
Connections will be established from the pool. They will take it from the pool. Once the operation is completed, immediately connection will be closed by the pool manager. Otherwise, you can't run those applications in the production. Without connection pooling, no project will be deployed to the production.
Okay.
If you deploy the project to the production without connection pool, within 1 or 2 days of time, database connections will be completed, then connection exhausted problem will occur, then your application will stop working.
Mm.
Sir, simply suppose my application wants to communicate with database. That's why we are using connections object. Okay.
Mhm.
And that connection object is available in connection pool.
Yes.
Okay. So then that properties, whatever you have mentioned in the that properties file, just could you please explain one more time briefly, sir?
What is the properties? What are the properties we are configuring here is, so when the project is starting, this connection pool is getting created by default, right?
Yes, sir.
When the pool is creating, how many connections should be available in that pool, when that connection should be closed, when that connection should be timed out, that we are informing to the pool manager.
Okay.
Okay. If I don't give those values, by default connection pool will be created with the default properties. I don't want the default properties. That's why I'm configuring those properties so that pool connections will be created by using those properties.
Okay.
Yes.
Sir, for each request, a new connection, I mean, uh, a new connection will be taken from connection pooling.
Yes, right.
Okay.
Sir,
So
I have a doubt.
What is the
Connection
default
pooling,
value for connection? Default number of connections.
sorry,
What is the default number of connections? If we
10,
don't give any customized.
10, 10, 10.
hello sir. The
At
connection
production
pooling,
level,
it is a one-time process when we deploy any application on
Yes,
production, right?
yes, it is a one-time configuration.
Okay. And what is the default connection values in database?
That from database to database it will change, sir. If you go for licensed databases, they will increase the size also, number of connections.
Can we increase or they will by default give those
They
values?
will increase that. The administrators will increase. We can't. Programmer will not do that. A DB administrator will. They will set the default connection size.
Okay. Okay. Fine.
Sir, if there is a difference between two requests is 5 seconds means, if you give connection timeout 4 second means, then connection will be disconnected, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So in the data JPA, we no need to do anything here because that is already having the connection pool, which is called Hikari connection pool. Good. Fine. Guys, with this, we are done with data JPA except one concept. How to retrieve the data from multiple tables using data JPA by writing a join query. That concept is pending. Okay. For that concept, for the previous batch also, I forgot to explain that concept, and I will prepare one video for that concept and will upload to our YouTube channel by tomorrow or day after tomorrow. This weekend I will do that work right now. So our next class will be on Spring Web MVC. Okay, so this Saturday and Sunday we don't have a class. We will have our next class on Monday. Okay, so please use these 2 days of time to practice what are the concepts that we have discussed as of now in the Spring Boot and data JP.
Hello,
Okay,
hello,
so the next session we are going to
hello,
start with.
hello.
Sir, listen to me, sir. Let me complete, man. The next class we are going to start with data. JPA is completed today, except one concept, how to retrieve the data from multiple tables. In the next session, we are going to start with Spring Web MVC. Okay.
Sir, embedded database.
Embedded database will be covered in the MVC.
Okay.
Caching also.
How to configure H2 database, how to configure embedded H2 is the embedded database. That will be discussed in the Spring Web MVC.
Hello, private batch also not there tomorrow.
Yeah, so tomorrow, this weekend, we don't have morning batch also and this batch also. Okay.
Ashok, in Spring Boot, you will also cover distributed locking
Yes,
mechanism.
yes, I will cover that also. Distributed logging will be covered. Distributed cache also will be covered.
Okay, and scheduling and asynchronous, this will
Yes.
be also.
Yeah,
Okay,
everything.
okay, Ashok. Okay.
And
Thank
guys,
you.
one video that I want you people to watch, that is profiles concept in the Spring Boot. Okay.
Sir, in JPA, multiple data source configuration,
We will
you
discuss
have
that, sir. In the web, we are going to discuss that. Profiles in Spring Boot.
Sir, for Hibernate, any videos are available from scratch? I want to learn.
Hibernate videos are not there. I want you to go through this video, Spring Boot profiles, how to work with the profiles in the Spring Boot in these 2 days of time, whenever you get some free time. So I want you people to complete this profiles concept in the Spring Boot. That is important. Okay. So our next session will be on the Monday.
So what the for next module, what is the necessary for the next module, like basic topics?
Spring Boot data, whatever we covered, that is sufficient for the next module.
Okay.
Okay. Next, we are going to start with part 3 of our course, that is Spring Web MVC. So we'll start that on Monday. Okay. So before coming to that Monday session, so please complete the profiles video that I have given in the chat box. Even I will send that mail. In that mail also I will mention the assignment. Please complete that. We'll continue on Monday. Thank you.
Sir, how many days it will take for web MVC, sir?
10 days.
Okay, sir.
10 microservices, right, sir?
Hello.
Rest.
We are going to start Web MVC. After that MVC RESTful service, after that microservice. So 2 parts completed, remaining 3 parts are pending.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Tell me.
Check in all these projects along with the text files, because on Classroom actually we find it hard to switch from one file to another. So if they are available in JIT, that all notes, right, along with
Sure,
project.
I will share that.
Yeah, sir. Yeah. The text files, the text format will be, very useful, sir. So that we can revision and, from top to bottom or wherever you want to go.
Sure. I will share
So
that,
it's
guys.
very
Please
flexible.
watch that profiles video before coming to
Yes.
Monday session. We'll see you on Monday.